Quick wear+childbirth+system+cool text+trash+group pet, where can a worker not go crazy? So Su Hua, the little fox who worked at the Fast Penetration Bureau, killed the target of the task and switched to a childbearing task. As long as you conquer the sons of the heavenly Tao who have lost their offspring due to being too strong, you can exchange survival points and rewards. Attack men. Isn't that what they are best at in the fox world? Su Hua suddenly felt that this job had not been changed wrong. She happily completed the task with her golden finger system. The first world, soft and weak fake daughter versus extinct tyrant, a big tyrant with a dark belly and a ruthless heart, and an unpredictable personality, meets a fake love story and a fake daughter with a brain she doesn't understand. What about the agreed-upon sexual frigidity? The second world, brainless money-worshipping Miss versus disabled regent king, once a disabled man stands up, some aspects are really scary keywords of the novel. Good pregnancy and fast wearing. The delicate and soft fox is favored by the group on the plane without pop-ups, good pregnancy and fast wearing. The delicate and soft fox is favored by the group on the plane. TXT complete collection download, good pregnancy and fast wearing. The delicate and soft fox is favored by the group on the plane. Latest chapter reading. Chapter 1. Soft and weak fake daughter versus extinct tyrant, 01. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1. Soft and weak fake daughter versus extinct tyrant, 01. Su Hua worked so hard that she doubted life, so she stabbed the man who didn't love her and abused her to death. At this moment, she was swinging her furry fox tail and bouncing on the man's body, saying, "Stupid man, this affectionate supporting woman's fast-dressing task is over." As a millennium-old fox spirit, she couldn't accept that there were men in this world she couldn't seduce, which was too embarrassing for them in the fox world. Along with her cursing voice, there was also a merciless mechanical sound. Mission failure, world collapse, about to leave the small world. The next second, Su Hua will be teleported to the base. Su Hua, what did you do? Killed the target of the mission. Your task was to play the role of a vicious female supporting character who loved the male lead so much but couldn't help but beg for it. As a result, you killed the male lead. Su Hua blinked her innocent fox eyes and looked at the director. "Oh, I'm sorry. I had to beg a little bit, how could someone not love me?" Su Hua is a 1,000-year-old fox spirit who failed to cross the tribulation and worked in the Fast Pass Bureau. She earns survival rewards by completing tasks in the Fast Pass Bureau. The director has never seen such an outrageous thing before. The mission failed because the executor was too stinky and narcissistic. Your survival value is almost not enough to be erased, so you still have to pick, said the director. Currently, there is only one last subsystem task in the Bureau. I'll give it to you now. If you don't complete it, you'll have nothing left. Birth subsystem. System. Hello Executor, I am the birth system. Your task is to help the son of the heavenly way, Yan Mian, who has great ambitions in the small world but faces difficulties in inheriting offspring. In addition, if you win the favor of the Son of Heaven during the process, you can earn points and exchange them for props to help you complete tasks in the small world. Only when the favorability reaches 60% can one conceive offspring. Isn't that just seducing men? Su Hua picked her beautiful fox eyes and said, "It's not easy yet, let's tie it up. Your identity in this small world is Jiang Wan, the false daughter of the Prime Minister's family in the Apocalypse Kingdom who was wrongly held. The Prime Minister received a decree to marry his daughter to the tyrant male protagonist Rongyi, who is the son of the heavenly way in this world. However, it is the true daughter Jiang Shui who is going to marry Rongyi, not you. Rongyi ascended to the throne at a young age and wielded great power. He was poisoned from a young age and had an unpredictable personality. The harem selects concubines every year, but many of them have no return and only live for 3 months. Please be careful when executing." Before Su Hua could answer, her eyes darkened and she was immediately teleported into Jiang Wan's body. She opened her blurry eyes and was surrounded by a quaint and unfamiliar environment. The bamboo curtain on the vermilion windowsill swayed gently with the wind, and next to the windowsill was the woman's dressing table. The copper mirror on the dressing table reflected the woman's beautiful face, with spring in her eyebrows and eyes, and her skin like a condensed fat. Her pure white clothes couldn't stop her beauty. TSK, Jiang Wan has a pretty good face and hasn't wronged her too much. Jiang Wan was still admiring her beauty when the door was forcefully opened from outside, making a loud bang. A woman in a blue dress came in with tears streaming down her face, carrying a large bundle in her hand, followed by several servants and guards. Seeing Jiang Wan, the woman rushed forward with an angry expression and pushed her hard, saying, "Jiang Wan, it was you who reported and caused me to fail to escape. If I were to enter the palace, I would definitely not let you go." Su Hua, also known as Jiang Wan, is at a loss at this moment. The mechanical voice of the system reminded, he is the true daughter of the Prime Minister's office, Jiang Shui. She has always been unwilling to marry the emperor and wanted to escape marriage, but was reported by the original owner Jiang Wan. It seems that Jiang Shui has been caught for escaping marriage. You need to find a way to marry the emperor into the palace. Jiang Wan naturally knew that once Jiang Shui entered the palace, it would be difficult for her to complete the task, especially since runaway marriage would involve the family. The high position and power of the Prime Minister can easily lead to the king's suspicion of disloyalty. If they escape marriage, the entire palace of the Prime Minister may be implicated, not to mention completing the mission. It is unlikely that they will die before completing their mission. System prompt. Prime Minister Jiang Chongshan is approaching the center. Jiang Wan's eyebrows and eyes turned, with a look of wanting to explain, "Sister, I'm here for the whole Jiang family." "Shut up, it's all you," Jiang Shui said and pushed her forward again. Jiang Wan was prepared this time, but still deliberately stumbled and wanted to fall back, with a painful expression. "Sister, if you want to blame me, blame me. But if you just leave like this, my father and the Jiang family will be finished. Don't blame her for acting, who let Jiang Shui push her." Bold. Behind him came Jiang Chongshan's angry rebuke of dissatisfaction. Before entering the house, Jiang Chongshan had heard the conversation between the two sisters. In fact, he had always felt guilty about Jiang Shui, the newly found daughter, and was unwilling to marry her to the Holy One. After all, even if he survived after entering the palace, it would be a lonely life without children. But Jiang Shui had just returned to the Yuan family a month before the imperial edict came. He could not disobey the imperial edict, which would affect 9 ethnic groups. But he didn't expect Jiang Shui to ignore the life and death of the Jiang family and escape marriage, and even blame Jiang Wan. He felt somewhat disappointed in his heart and stepped forward to help Jiang Wan up. "Waner, where did you hurt yourself?" Jiang Chongshan's face showed a hint of anxiety and relationship, and Jiang Wan knew that this concern was genuine. Jiang Wan lowered her eyebrows and shook her head in grievance, her obedient and gentle appearance evoking sympathy. "Waner is fine, thank you, father, for your concern." As he spoke, his eyebrows furrowed deeper and his legs trembled even more. Jiang Chongshan saw how sensible she was and looked at an immature daughter, feeling both angry and guilty in his heart. On the other side, Jiang Shui stood on the side with jealousy and gritted her teeth fiercely. "Father, have you forgotten that I am your biological daughter? She has taken over so many years of my life as a fake, and you still favor her. I just came back and asked me to marry Rongyi, who can't bear children and even confiscate his wife. What's the difference between this and sending me to die?" "Shut up." Jiang Chongshan became angry and fiercely slapped his daughter, who had been stranded since childhood. He felt guilty and fell to the ground. This is the imperial city under the feet of the emperor in the country of Tianqi. Even though Rongyi is in the deep palace, spies have ears and eyes all over the world. Jiang Shui dared to say such heinous and immoral words even when she called out the name of the Holy One today. Do you think your life is too long, or do you want to destroy the entire Jiang family? Jiang Wan frowned at the stupid sister and said to herself unexpectedly, Jiang Chongshan has been an official for decades and has risen and fallen in the dark officialdom, but Jiang Shui is such a stupid daughter. The system borrowed a message. Maybe it's because she inherited her mother. Mother. Jiang Wan wanted to ask something else, but was interrupted by a sudden sound from the system. Alarm, Executor, the target of the strategy, Rong Yi, is approaching. How could the Emperor come here now? Jiang Wan suddenly had an idea. If she didn't take action now, there might not be any good opportunities. She must not let Jiang Shui ruin her last mission. Sister, speak with caution. Jiang Wan stepped forward and gently grabbed Jiang Shui. Her voice was neither loud nor low, but she was sure it was a volume that could be heard clearly outside the door. Sister, you just returned to the Jiang family and don't understand. The Emperor is kind, so I don't think you will blame him. As the Emperor, marrying him is a blessing that has been cultivated for several generations. Besides, as the Emperor's vassal, my father should be loyal to the Emperor. If the Emperor looks up to our Jiang family's daughter, it is a glory for our Jiang family. Jiang Chongshan's gaze paused, with a hint of approval flashing in his eyes. Jiang Wan's words helped to dispel her eldest daughter's unwavering words just now, and she took the initiative to emphasize that the Emperor is kind and will not blame. Otherwise, if the walls have ears, then the glory of the Jiang family will come here. However, Jiang Shui didn't understand the meaning behind it and looked at Jiang Wan disdainfully. Blessing, do you want this blessing for you? Jiang Wan's eyes flickered, and indeed, the opportunity had arrived. She frowned with a regretful expression and said, Sister, I'm not worthy anymore. You are the true miss of the Jiang family, and it was my father's pity that left me at home. How can I, as someone with an impure identity, be worthy of your majesty? If your majesty is willing, I am also willing to marry your majesty. Your majesty can stabilize the court at a young age, so that the people of the world can live and work in peace. Such a wise and excellent man naturally needs to be worthy of a good woman. Sister, don't believe those insulting words to your majesty anymore, they are just rumors. The last sentence is also a reminder to Jiang Shui, don't say any nonsense, it will affect the whole family. Jiang Shui sneered when she heard these words. The person she was going to marry was not her, so of course she would say such cold words. But Jiang Wan didn't care what Jiang Shui thought, what she wanted was what Rong Yi outside the door thought. Newcomers are new here, please take good care of them. Please recommend monthly tickets, leave comments, and encourage and support them. Quick to wear and give birth to a child. The female protagonist is not a strong force, and if you don't like it, you can take a detour. Please spray lightly. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. Soft and Weak Fake Daughter vs Extinct Tyrant, 02. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. Soft and Weak Fake Daughter vs Extinct Tyrant, 02, Ding Dong, the favorability of the task object has increased by 1. Congratulations to the executor for obtaining their first favorability. The reward item is Beauty and Beauty Pill. Please prepare to receive it. Accept. Jiang Wan skillfully reached into her sleeve to catch the dropped prop. The man surrounded by a few people outside the door had cold eyebrows and eyes, and a faint smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. The attendants around him were trembling and sweating profusely. The man is the Emperor of the Apocalypse Kingdom, Rong Yi. After a while, the man said, "Go back to the palace." The attendant beside him responded in a low voice, lowered his head for a moment, and looked hesitantly at the courtyard behind him, saying, "Your Majesty, the daughter of Lord Jiang is so disrespectful to your Majesty. It shows that her father is also disrespectful to your Majesty in daily life. Your Majesty needs to teach him a good lesson." Rong Yi kept walking, the curve of his mouth becoming shallower. He patted his clothes with a somewhat casual expression. "You can speak, and who gave you your instructions, right?" The attendant was taken aback by the words, and a chill suddenly spread throughout his body. He trembled and knelt on the ground, saying, "Your Majesty, what I have told you is the truth. I'm afraid the Prime Minister is really disrespectful to you. I knew your Majesty was not easy to fool, but for the safety of his mother at home, he had to fight to the death. As long as he planted a seed of doubt in your Majesty's heart and met that person's requirements, his mother would also be saved." Rong Ye's expression remained unchanged, still cold. A strange smile appeared at the corner of his mouth, and he wrote lightly, "Take it with you." A few guards with knives emerged from behind, dragging the people on the ground and leaving. The attendant dared not ask for mercy and lowered his head with a face as pale as ashes. Suddenly, a man's cold voice came from the front, making him afraid. "Since you are so loyal, why not take your family with you to the underworld to serve that person?" "No, your Majesty, please spare my servant's family." "Your Majesty." The attendant struggled tirelessly with fear and regret in his eyes, begging for mercy. However, that noble man had no trace of emotion. The imperial palace, the hall of diligence. Rong Yi sat upright in his seat reading a book, listening to the report from the dark guard. "Oh. Even though it's a fake daughter, she's still left in the Prime Minister's mansion." Thinking back to what I heard today, a hint of fun and playfulness flashed in my eyes. The fake daughter of the Prime Minister's mansion is quite interesting. What about Wang Yusher's side? "Wang Yusher, I have delivered a letter to the palace of concubine Min," said the dark guard. Pondering for a moment, the man lazily looked up and gestured for him to continue speaking. "Lord Wang, the imperial censor, urged Empress Dowager Min to remain calm and not cause any trouble. The importance of having one son is paramount, and the people of the Prime Minister's office should not be feared." "Humph, the old man is quite calm and composed, but unfortunately, all the daughters and sons he raised are idiots. There are only a few concubines in Rong Ye's harem, and only a few concubines who marry into the secret residence have not been enthroned to this day. Among them, only Wang Yusher supported Rong Yi during the competition for the crown prince position, so his daughter Wang Minji was also granted the only imperial concubine position. Compared to other concubines and concubines, she was the most favored. I was pregnant 3 years ago when I first entered the mansion, but later my child was killed by an enemy. At that time, the imperial physician said that he was poisoned when he was young and had been fighting for years. It would be particularly difficult for him to have children, unless he encountered a woman with a constitution that was prone to pregnancy. Remembering the old feelings of the past and Minfei's pregnancy and miscarriage, he also treated Minfei and her mother's family favorably. However, now the royal family is gradually increasing their courage, and it is unclear who is the master of this world. Surprisingly, he dared to let people influence his thoughts. The dark guard knelt for a while without hearing anything and hesitated to speak, "So, Your Majesty," over from the Prime Minister's office. "Now I don't know whether the Prime Minister has any strange feelings towards His Majesty. If so, his daughter may be a eyeliner." Rong Yi threw the book on the table, got up and walked to the window, thinking about what he had heard during the day. He smiled lightly and said, "Since she wants to enter the palace so much, let her in. If she listens, stay by her side. If you don't listen, just pretend that this person hasn't been in the palace before." He originally wanted Jiang Chongshan's daughter to enter the palace to put pressure on concubine Min and the Wang family. He didn't care which daughter of Jiang Chongshan entered the palace. Yes. Also, the one who doesn't want to enter the palace should also come in, said Rong Yi with a hint of evil interest in his eyes. Yes. The next morning, the Prime Minister put on his court uniform and walked out the door to see the guards who had been serving the emperor holding the imperial decree and smiling at him. "Oh, why did the Lord come?" Jin Wei smiled and approached. "In the name of the emperor, I personally come to convey the holy message to the Prime Minister." Mr. Jiang, please come out with your whole family to receive the order. Jiang Chongshan's heart trembled as he beckoned people into the mansion. In no time, all the people from the Prime Minister's office came out to take orders. In Fengtian Qingyu, the emperor ordered that there are 2 ladies in the Prime Minister's residence. They are gentle, and good-natured. 3 days later, the 2 sisters will go to the palace together to serve them. What? Jiang Shui was stunned and looked at the guards in disbelief after realizing it. Prime Minister, why don't you express your gratitude? Jiang Chongshan suddenly regained his senses and stood up, hastily taking the imperial edict. Sending away a group of mighty people, the Prime Minister's office suddenly became much more spacious. Why is this happening? Why does Jiang Wan still want me to go? Can't the Holy One let me go? Jiang Shui's beautiful face was filled with resentment. Can't we escape after all? Bold. Do you know what you're talking about? Get back to your yard and think about it. Jiang Chongshan was both angry and helpless. With Jiang Shui's personality entering the palace, he didn't know what kind of moth he would provoke. Father, I am clearly your biological daughter and the daughter of the Prime Minister's mansion. Did you bring me back just to send me to the palace and become a sacrifice for your power struggle? Jiang Chongshan's eyes darkened, his heart filled with disappointment and helplessness. During the years since Jiang Shui returned, he had been doting on and holding on to her everywhere, even distancing himself from Jiang Wan, a child he had raised for over a decade. Unexpectedly, Jiang Shui thought of him so much. I didn't want to pay attention to her anymore, so I waved to the attendant and said, "Take the young lady back to her room to rest. You're not allowed to go out without my permission." Then he turned to look at Jiang Wan and said, "Wanner comes with me as my father." In the study room, Jiang Chongshan's official uniform lost his sense of vitality, with a face of helplessness and sorrow. "Wanner, I apologize to you for being my father. Since Shui returned, I have not talked to you properly because I owe her a debt and I am afraid she will be sad." Huasong Jian looked helpless. "My father originally thought that Shui was enough to enter the palace, but I didn't expect. But your Majesty's intention cannot be disobeyed by anyone, so you should consider it as for the Jiang family." Jiang Wan approached and bowed slightly, saying to Jiang Chongshan in front of him, "Father doesn't need to blame himself. Entering the palace can be considered as fulfilling his daughter's wish." Jiang Wan's words are sincere, after all, this is an important step for her to complete the task. Jiang Wan's heart was filled with joy, and her tone of voice when she looked at Jiang Chongshan was full of determination. "My daughter will definitely maintain the prosperity of the Jiang family and have peace for a lifetime." Okay, truly a good daughter for a father." Jiang Chongshan turned around and pulled her up from the ground. "However, Wanner, my father wants to ask you something. Shui has just returned to the capital and has a reckless personality. Unlike you who grew up next to me, you should take more care of yourself in the palace in the future." He spoke with a puzzled expression on his face. Jiang Wan knew that even though Jiang Shui had not been raised by her since childhood, she was still a biological child and he would not let go. Jiang Wan nodded and looked sensible. "I know, father. As long as I can, I will definitely take care of my sister. As for this, she can do it, provided that Jiang Shui herself does not come to her as a demon." Jiang Chongshan nodded and looked at her hesitantly, his eyes filled with reluctance and guilt. The concubine Min in the palace is not easy to get along with. Behind her is her father, Wang Yusher, and she has been lawless all along because she is the only concubine who has ever conceived a holy child. However, you can rest assured that serving as an official for many years has not been a free lunch. After entering the palace, just be careful not to provoke the emperor, and you don't have to worry about anything else. This is also the reason why Jiang Chongshan dared to let Jiang Shui enter the palace at the beginning. It is indeed difficult for the holy emperor to have an heir, but it can be said that his wife whose pen were those dead concubines. He still has a certain number. Jiang Wan nodded and bid farewell to Jiang Chongshan. After returning, Jiang Wan contacted the system and said, "What's wrong with this concubine Min? Rong Ye's descendants are facing difficulties." When she was in the palace, the current concubine Min was the only one who was pregnant, but was later killed by someone. With this, concubine Min became the only woman in the palace to be granted the title of concubine. Jiang Wan raised her eyebrows and said, "I remember you said that the reason why there is such a task of having children is because no one else in these worlds can conceive a child of the heavenly way unless I complete the task." So, the child of concubine Min back then was not even Rong Ye's. 3 days later, the Prime Minister's office prepared a magnificent carriage early and sent Jiang and her companions to the palace. Before entering the palace, Jiang Wan even took the beauty pill given by the system. Although her appearance seemed unchanged, she looked even more beautiful and charming. Inside the carriage, Jiang Shui sat with a lifeless expression, her eyes turning red. Jiang Wan didn't pay attention to her, just annoyed by her crying appearance. The matter had already become a foregone conclusion. What's the use of crying? The carriage slowly walked to the palace gate, got off the carriage, and then took a jiaozi ride into the palace, heading towards the self-cultivation hall to pay respects to His Majesty. But I was stopped on the way. What's wrong? Why did it stop? A scolding came from across. Who dares to block the path of Empress Min? End of this chapter. Chapter 3. Soft and Weak Fake Daughter vs. Extinct Tyrant, 03. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3. Soft and Weak Fake Daughter vs. Extinct Tyrant, 03. Jiang Wan rolled her eyes inwardly. She had just entered the palace and Rong Yeren had not seen her. This concubine Min came to find fault. Refer to Empress Min. The 2 young ladies from the Prime Minister's family sitting inside this delicate woman are also new to the palace. In no time, a coquettish voice came from across with a hint of disdain. As soon as you enter the palace, you need to hurry to see your Majesty. Since you are from the harem, you should follow the rules of the harem. Bold, Jiang Wan, Jiang Shui, do you know the sin? Suddenly, a group of servants and maidservants knelt around, indicating the prestige of concubine Min in the palace. As soon as she entered the palace, she was intimidated. This Minfei is so unattractive and lacks confidence in herself that she can't wait to trouble her. Jiang Wan chuckled lightly and lifted the curtain as she walked out. Empress Min, calm down. The beauty smiled, dressed in luxurious attire, with fair skin. Her eyebrows and eyes were just a faint expression, giving off a feeling of charm. Simple jewelry embellishments had already accentuated her like a celestial figure. Minfei, dressed in luxurious palace attire, saw a hint of jealousy in her face and eyes. Humph, he is indeed a fox charmer. Jiang Wan gently leaned forward and bowed, with a demeanor different from that of an ordinary woman, without any fear in her eyes. My daughter, the legitimate daughter of the Prime Minister's office, Jiang Wan, see Empress Dowager Min. Humph, with a fox-like appearance, I rushed to your Majesty's palace early without any reserved demeanor from my daughter's family. Is this how the Prime Minister teaches his daughter? Miss Jiang, aren't there 2 of them? One is bowing, and the other is. Why should we ignore our mother? Asked Ling Long, a palace maid beside her. Upon hearing this, the coquettish girl behind her was suddenly lifted up. Jiang Shui's face turned white with fear when she saw the battle outside, and her legs softened as she sat in front of the sedan chair. Empress. Jiang Wan frowned slightly, without any fear in her heart. She looked innocent and said, Madam, please forgive me. I and my sister did not understand the rules when they first entered the palace. Please forgive me. As a newcomer entering the palace, shouldn't you come first to pay respects to the most esteemed empress in the harem? What are you in such a hurry to see your Majesty for? The palace maid asked again. According to the rules of the Tianqi kingdom, we should indeed visit the empress when entering the palace. Jiang Wan smiled faintly and said, but as far as I know, your Majesty has not made a queen. You. Jiang Wan's words made Minfei's face tinged with anger. What a clever girl. No wonder the emperor wanted you. As far as she knew, what Her Majesty originally wanted was the daughter of the Prime Minister's mansion, and what she wanted to marry was also the daughter Jiang Shui, who had just returned from the Prime Minister's mansion. I don't know why she changed the imperial decree after visiting the Prime Minister's mansion and took Jiang Wan. According to the rules of the Kingdom of Apocalypse, it is indeed the Empress who needs to be seen before entering the palace. However, Your Majesty has not yet established a queen, and she is the highest-ranking official in this palace. She originally intended to use this reason to cause trouble. I just didn't expect this dead girl to dare to publicly mock her for not being the queen. The Empress praised me falsely. Jiang Wan was neither humble nor overbearing. The Empress also said that it was the Emperor's will that I could enter the palace. We sisters were bowed down by the Emperor. It was a great honor to serve the Emperor in the palace. Naturally, we wanted to find the Emperor to thank us first. Your Majesty, I don't know what's wrong with coming down to you. The more Minfei thought about it, the angrier she became. It is said that you are not Jiang Chongshan's biological daughter, your identity is unclear, and you don't know what Anne's intentions are. Empress. I apologize. Jiang Shui was already too scared to speak out, stuttering. Shui also said that she should come to visit Empress first, but my younger sister really doesn't want to listen to my advice. Jiang Wan's eyes turned cold as she looked at the person behind her. This idiot. Empress, I naturally want to see Your Majesty's dragon face as soon as possible because of my admiration for His Majesty. Didn't Empress enter the palace because of her admiration for Your Majesty? Minfei frowned and looked at her, choking for a moment. Saying yes, then there is no excuse to make things difficult for her. Saying no, isn't it admitting that she entered the palace not because of admiration for His Majesty, but for other purposes? This girl has some tricks. Jiang Wan smiled slightly, with an innocent look in her eyes, as if she had asked these words innocently. Early in the morning, this road is quite lively. A deep and powerful voice came from behind. Everyone exclaimed in surprise and quickly turned around to salute. Concubine Min also got off the sedan chair and saluted in the direction of the sound. See Your Majesty. Jiang Wan bowed obediently and wanted to look up at him, but dared not, secretly communicating with the system. What impression does Rongyi have of me now? How much does he like me? The system hesitated and said, 2%. What does 2% mean? Jiang Wan suppressed the blurted question and felt extremely depressed. With her beautiful beauty and stunning face, Rongyi only had a 2% liking for her. Is he still a normal man? But she just likes to mess with men that others can't take down. She was still muttering, and a dragon pattern embroidered with gold thread appeared in front of her. The man's deep and magnetic voice came. Lift your head up. Jiang Wan stabilized her mind and slowly looked up, with a hint of admiration, affection, and shyness in her eyes. The man in front of me has a tall figure, a cold and stern face, and deep eyes with a hint of coldness and exploration. Don't say, Rongyi looks really nice. Jiang Wan looked at him in a daze, somewhat stunned, with a curious and innocent expression of a little white rabbit. Your Majesty. Rongyi was surprised that he thought his coldness would scare the young lady who was raised in the depths of the gods, but he unexpectedly saw her with a calm and worried expression. Interesting. Congratulations, Executor. The object's favorability rate has increased by 2, and now it's 5%. Jiang Wan's heart suddenly relaxed, as expected, her beauty would never be inferior. However, it only rose by 2 points without any reason, and the Emperor's heart is hard to guess. Jiang Aiqing is very good at raising her daughter and is indeed a beautiful woman. A beautiful woman is like this, with a charming smile and a hopeful eye. Therefore, she is conferred the title of concubine and given the title of Qin. The face of concubine Min on the side suddenly turned ugly, with jealousy and concern in her eyes. Your Majesty, Miss Jiang has just entered the palace. Is it a bit irregular to bestow the title of concubine as soon as she arrives? Empress Min felt jealous and did not see the man's gradually gloomy eyes. What, concubine Min is questioning my decision? Minfei regained her senses and realized something was wrong. Her heart tightened and she broke out in a cold sweat, saying, "Of course, it's not. As long as your Majesty likes it." However, this younger sister has been granted the position of concubine, and there is one more. At this moment, Rong Yi noticed Jiang Shui kneeling beside him without looking up, unsure of what she was thinking. Jiang Shuiyuan originally believed that the rumored emperor must be a violent and ugly man, but just now he saw that stunning face and heard that he was immediately crowned as a concubine, which was somewhat unexpected for her. Since entering the palace has become an unchangeable fact, why not, ladies and gentlemen, see your Majesty? She looked at the man with seductive eyes, and then smiled at Jiang Wan. Congratulations, my younger sister has become a concubine. She looks like a good sister's. It seems that she is not the one who just betrayed her sister. Rong Yi glanced lightly without any fluctuation and said, I almost forgot about this Prime Minister Qianjin who didn't want to enter the palace. Since that's the case, I'll appoint you as a concubine. The smile on Jiang Shui's face froze. Why is she a concubine, one level shorter than Jiang Wan? Not yet banned. Thank you, Your Majesty. Minfei finally had a slight looseness on her face and a hint of mockery in her eyes. However, Your Majesty, since my sisters have just entered the palace, why don't I select a few suitable maids and maids from the palace to serve them, and also teach them the rules? Jiang Wan chuckles lightly, teaching rules. I don't know what it will be like to be secretly honed into. But Jiang Wan couldn't say anything directly. She looked up at Rong Yi with a smile on her face, a bold expression of unwillingness. Interestingly, is this to support him on his own? Rong Yi looked at the bold and unrestrained woman in front of him, and for some reason, he thought of a little white fox he had raised when he was young. He always liked to tease the cats and dogs of other princes, and every time he was caught by the princes, he would come to him for support. Supporting oneself is also okay, after all, he also needs to beat Minfei. No need, I can rest assured of the woman taught by Jiang Aiqing. The Chaoyang Palace to the east is still empty, so Qin Pin and Jiayu can stay there. After speaking, without waiting for anyone to react, he turned around and walked towards the Hall of Diligence. Only a stunned person remained. Chaoyang Palace, that is the closest to Your Majesty's cultivation hall, and it is also the place where Your Majesty grew up from a young age. What a favor it is to give Chaoyang Palace to these two sisters. It seems that the sky in this harem is about to change. Rong Ye's actions may seem to value them and dote on them, but Jiang Wan knows that his favorability is only 5%, to put it bluntly, even for cats and dogs, it's not just 5%. Before Jiang Wan could think of anything, the people around came forward and congratulated him. Concubine Min left in anger, looking at her with a resentful look in her eyes before leaving. End of this chapter. Chapter 4. Soft and Weak Fake Daughter vs Extinct Tyrant, 04. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4. Soft and Weak Fake Daughter vs Extinct Tyrant, 04. Jiang Wan and Jiang Shui were respectively led into the Chaoyang Palace, grooming and dressing up. Because Jiang Wan was a concubine, she lived in the main hall of Chaoyang Palace. As a concubine, Jiang Shuijie was brought into the side hall, and even the number of people serving her was reduced by half. Watching Jiang Wan surrounded by her, Jiang Shui's heart grew even more resentful. After glancing at the main hall, she turned her head and strode into the side hall. A group of people came and went to serve, and Jiang Wan observed carefully. She saw something strange in her eyes as it appeared on the table. What is that? She pointed to a chubby white porcelain doll on the table and asked. There will be a dedicated person in front of the main palace to decorate the concubines, and this doll clearly does not match the style of the Zhaoyang palace. Upon hearing Jiang Wan's question, several people's faces were not quite natural. One of the older maids approached and said, "I would like to inform Empress Qin that this is a porcelain doll with good symbolism. I wish Empress Qin an early birth to a noble son. Your Majesty loves these auspicious porcelain pieces." "Oh, this way." Jiang Wan's expression was faint, as she looked at the mother who answered without saying anything more. After being surrounded by a group of maids for a long time, she sat on the bed in a red dress. The nanny who just answered Jiang Wan's question looked at the woman in front of her with a stunning look in her eyes. The red attire accentuated Jiang Wan's already bright face, while her slightly upward gaze was alluring but not vulgar. The mother coughed lightly and, with a wooden face, advised, "Madam, please wait here for your Majesty." After speaking, he bowed slightly and withdrew. After the person left, two maidservants entered the door, Qing Luo and Qing Yu, who had been following her all along. One of them had an angry face. "What, even though we were close maids brought in by the young lady, they didn't allow us to serve them? It's unreasonable to keep me from being kicked out. Qing Luo, be cautious." Another slightly older girl with an oval face sounded a warning. Jiang Wan looked at Qing Luo and advised, "Qing Yu is right. Qing Luo, your temperament should be changed. This is in the palace, not at home." Both of them were maids brought out by her from the mansion, naturally speaking to her, but this was the palace, not a place where people could talk casually. "But this is too much. I just want you to be taken care of without someone close to you in the palace." Jiang Wan naturally knew the problem inside, but now is not the time. After waiting for a long time, Jiang Wan felt something was wrong and frowned slightly as she stood up. At this moment, there was a commotion outside the door. A few people looked outside and in came a tall and slender woman with a gentle appearance from Jiangnan. "Oh, my sister is still waiting for your Majesty," the woman asked with a coquettish smile. Jiang Wan looked at the newcomer and blinked her eyes. Just now, her bright and charming appearance became somewhat innocent. She tilted her head to look at the woman and said sweetly in her voice, "Who are you, sister?" "I am Yun Pin. Your Majesty was delayed by something at the Qingjing Hall. I thought my younger sister should still be waiting here, so I came to inform her." Yun Pin took Jiang Wan's hand with a friendly expression and said, "By the way, let's also see what kind of beauty can win your Majesty's favor so much. It seems that she is indeed a great beauty." Of course she is a great beauty. Especially compared to women with average appearances in front of them. Jiang Wan proudly touched her round and delicate nose, slightly yawning and saying, "Sister is also gentle and charming, with a certain charm." Yun Bin looked at Jiang Wan's proud expression and felt displeased. After all, her appearance was not outstanding in this palace, let alone compared to Jiang Wan. However, Jiang Wan's pride was so obvious that she must be a fool with only appearance. She suppressed her displeasure and smiled, "By the way, will your Majesty come for a while? It's already dark. Why don't I take my sister out for a walk and familiarize myself with the surrounding environment?" Jiang Wan smiled with a childlike expression and said, "Okay, thank you, sister. How about our sisters? I can also talk to my sister personally." Before leaving, Yun Bin stopped Qing Luo and Qing Yu, who were going to follow together, and leaned close to Jiang Wan's ear and whispered, "About your Majesty." Jiang Wan did not refute and followed Yun Pin out alone. She wanted to see what this ordinary-looking woman was up to. Seeing the commotion in the side hall, Jiang Shui watched as she went out, full of confusion. After thinking for a moment, she called for her maid to follow her quietly. Jiang Wan obediently and attentively listened to Yun Bin's words on the road, circling around. Yun Bin took her to a secluded place that was not as bustling as the palace. "Oh, why did I bring my younger sister here when I was only talking to her?" Yun pretended to be surprised and regretful. "What's wrong?" Sister, is this? Yunbin hesitated to speak and said, "Hey, let me tell you the truth, sister. This is the cold palace. Concubines and concubines who were despised by the emperor in the past will be sent here for survival." Ah. Are you intentionally bringing her here for half a day, trying to scare her? Many people died inside, some concubines and concubines couldn't bear this kind of life and committed suicide here, while others hung themselves in front of this palace gate with a white silk thread. Jiang Wan caught a glimpse of the man. Made pit on the ground, which made her feel amused. She did indeed hold on to Yun Pin's arm tightly on her face and walked towards the pit with a trembling look of fear. "Sister, don't scare me. My legs can't walk anymore," Jiang Wan said with a tearful tone. "I was scared when I was young, and I was most afraid of these things." Her reaction made Yunbin's eyes sparkle with a proud smile. As expected, Yunbin heard an "ah" sound and Jiang Wan threw herself forward. Before Yunbin could even stop the smile in her eyes, she felt Jiang Wan desperately pulling her forward, unable to shake her off no matter how hard she tried. Yunbin and Jiang Wan fell out together, only feeling a severe pain in their waist. Jiang Wan fell all over her waist, to the point where she was even more embarrassed than Jiang Wan. "Damn it. This dead girl can't be intentional, can she?" Yunbin was about to have a seizure when she saw Jiang Wan looking at her with a pitiful expression. "Sister, I'm sorry, I'm too scared. Did I press you down?" Jiang Wan said as she tried to get up, but as she was halfway up, she fell back heavily. Yunbin only felt that her waist was about to be folded in half by her, and her gentle face was as pale as a ghost due to pain. She could no longer maintain her image and let out loud cries of pain. "Sister, I'm sorry, my leg seems to have twisted." Jiang Wan looked anxious and said, I can't get up anymore, my leg can't exert any strength." Yunbin was so painful that she wished to break Jiang Wan's leg, but knowing her purpose, she still endured the pain, moved Jiang Wan away, and got up from the ground. Jiang Wan sat on the ground, looking as if she couldn't get up. She looked at Yunbin and almost couldn't help but laugh out loud. Just now, Yunbin, who was gentle and beautiful, had messy hair, and her originally elegant and noble clothes had become dirty and torn because she deliberately tore them hard when she fell. However, Yunbin in front of her smiled and said, "Oh my, don't be afraid, sister." When sister came out, she didn't consider everything carefully. "I'll go back and call a sedan chair to pick you up. Wait for me." Speaking so, the person walked away without looking back. You should know that this cold palace is haunted all year round. Before, several palace maids were harassed to come and clean at night, but the next day they all went crazy. Jiang Wan, I hope you're just scared crazy, not scared to death." Not far away, the person who had been following carefully saw this scene and immediately ran back. Jiang Wan finished walking when she saw everyone. She put away the fear and tears on her face and stood up nimbly. "System, check where Rongyi is." "Executor, the execution object is coming from the Qingjing Hall, and you can encounter it from the road on the right." "Okay." Rongyi was surrounded as he walked towards the Zhaoyang Palace when suddenly the guards in front of the queue shouted, "Who is that?" He squinted his eyes and saw Jiang Wan, dressed in thin clothes, crying and blushing, leaning against the wall and trembling as she looked at him. "Why did you come?" "Your Majesty." With a pitiful and tearful expression, the guard in front trembled slightly as he held the knife. Within Chaoyang Palace, Jiang Shui from the side hall listened to the maid's report with a proud smile on her face. Humph, didn't she want to enter the palace? But now she's so scared that she can't walk. She deserves it. With this courage, why is she higher than me? It's ridiculous. The maid nodded in agreement. Shui Jieyu, the imperial kitchen has made some high points for the two empresses. Jiang Shui looked up at the exquisite pastry with a cold expression in her eyes and said, "Do you also have Jiang Wan?" Yes, the imperial pantry has sent gifts to both empresses. Jiang Shui sneered, let's leave it all here. I'll send it to her later. Yes. Waiting for someone to go out, Jiang Shui sneered and looked at the pastry. Jiang Wan. Do you, the thief who stole my life, deserve to use the same thing as me? Suddenly, there was a commotion outside, and the maid ran in from the door. Jieyu, your majesty is here. Thinking about the rumors outside, she tightened her heart and said, are you coming here? No, no, I went to the main hall and still held the Empress Qin in my arms. What? Chaoyang Palace, inside the main hall. The people of Chaoyang Palace were immediately stunned when they saw His Majesty holding Qin concubine back. The new Qin concubine has great skills. Rong Yi looked at the quiet person in his arms with tears in his eyes flickering slightly. She rushed into the cold palace as soon as she entered. Should she be said to have the courage? Or was it intentional? Jiang Wan was gently placed on the small couch, her head lowered and she remained silent. Rong Yi wanted to get up and leave, but was tightly grabbed by the corners of his clothes with both hands. Your Majesty, don't leave, I'm afraid. Rong Ye's heart warmed and his eyes dimmed. Afraid, dare you run around everywhere? Jiang Wan raised her small face to refute something, but stopped when she saw his slightly cold face. Wei Chu Baba said, I was wrong. Rong Yi remained silent and looked down at her, his eyes dim and uncertain. Jiang Wan reached out and took the porcelain doll from the table, hesitating to hand it over. Your Majesty, here it is. In his hand is a small porcelain doll, crystal clear but with a small picture of a person being stabbed. Rong Ye's face paused and he said in a cold, deep voice, where did it come from? End of this chapter. Chapter 5. Soft and Weak Fake Daughter vs. Extinct Tyrant, 05. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5. Soft and Weak Fake Daughter vs. Extinct Tyrant, 05. Jiang Wan smiled and said, Mama gave it to me, saying it's a celebration. Your Majesty will like it, and I also look very cute. Looking at her innocent and happy appearance, Rong Ye's eyes darkened as if he was pondering something. This porcelain doll was deliberately painted and spread in the palace when someone mocked him for killing his father and seizing the throne when he first ascended to the throne. After being caught at the source, he had already burned everything. But now Qin Pin has an extra one in her hand for no reason. I'm afraid that Nanny didn't know it was from that palace, and knew he was afraid of this. She deliberately handed it over to Qin Pin, hoping that she would be punished or even despised. Rong Yi didn't say much and threw the doll away to the person behind him. Looking at Jiang Wan with a curious gaze. It cannot be ruled out that Jiang Wan was intentional and did it the opposite way, perhaps intentionally using him to know the people behind the scenes. He likes smart women, but he doesn't like those who are too smart to calculate their thoughts on him. Don't take it again in the future, and don't like this kind of thing, the man said with a faint expression. Jiang Wan looked at him in surprise, with a hint of disappointment in her eyes. She lowered her head and let out a muffled moan. Rong Ye's eyes flickered, looking like a little rabbit that had been wronged all along. Seeing it made people itch and want to bully her. He picked up Jiang Wan and walked towards the bed. The curtain gradually fell and soon shook slightly. Halfway through, a low sobbing sound came from the bed. What's wrong? Are you still crying? Are you scared? Jiang Wan nodded and then shook her head, her bright eyes streaming with tears as she looked at him. Watching the man quietly waiting for her to speak, Jiang Wan's tears welled up even more. Your Majesty, are you angry? What? The man whispered in her ear with a hint of ambiguous breathing. Wanna knows she's wrong and shouldn't run around. If you don't like that porcelain doll, Wanna doesn't like it. Don't be angry with Wanna. Wanna just wants you to be happy and hopes you can like Wanna. Rong Yi was stunned, not realizing that she was concerned about this matter. He has been raised in the deep palace since childhood and has been accustomed to the bloody and vicious human nature. In addition to concubine Min's deliberate approach to him, the palace still carries fear and purpose. This woman, however, is wholeheartedly trying to please him, only concerned about whether he is happy or not. He reached out his hand and gently patted her. "Do you care so much about me?" Jiang Wan was momentarily stunned, as if something had been exposed. Jiang Wan was so panicked that she didn't dare to look at her. Her face instantly turned red and she cared. Rong Yi lifted her chin and stared straight at her as she lowered her head and kissed the woman's shy face. After a while, the woman heard bursts of sobs and ambiguous sounds. The noise coming from the tent grew louder and louder, and the palace maids guarding outside the door gradually blushed with embarrassment. In the latter half of the night, there was noise coming from the sleeping hall of Chaoyang Palace, accompanied by cries for mercy. Suddenly, a piercing scream came from the side hall in the quiet night. Rong Yi was disturbed and asked the person outside the door in a hoarse voice with a hint of displeasure, "Who is causing such a commotion?" "Your Majesty, it's Xue Jieyu from the side hall," her whole body and face covered in prickly heat, which is extremely itchy. At this moment, Jiang Wan's body was already a bit uncomfortable, and she felt a bit weak as she wanted to get up and shift Rong Yi's attention. "Your Majesty, you go out and take a look." Before Jiang Wan could finish speaking, she was pushed back by the man with red eyes. "Throw the person out." In no time, the room recalled ambiguous sounds. The next day, Rong Yi packed up and turned to look at the person on the bed. Jiang Wan's pure white arm stretched out, covered in faint and ambiguous marks. Her beautiful eyes closed slightly and she fell deeply asleep. After a moment of contemplation, Rong Yi walked out of the Chaoyang Palace and waved. "Come over and bow down to someone." Jin Xian, all the maids and maidservants who served Qin Bin last night were killed, and some kind-hearted people were arranged to come in to serve. There was also Yun Bin, who was deposed and thrown into the cold palace. The man said expressionlessly, as if talking about something small. Yes, Jin Xian looked at the nearby sleeping hall and knew in his heart that it was the emperor's venting of anger for Empress Qin. It seemed that this empress was not an ordinary person. As soon as Rong Yi left, Jiang Wan opened her eyes filled with clarity. After a pause, Jiang Wan finally woke up the temporarily blocked system. "Congratulations, we are one step closer to completing the task." Jiang Wan proudly raised her eyebrows, looking exactly as she had expected. "Nonsense, she's just a millennium-old fox spirit, can't she still seduce a mere man?" Rong Yi has already gotten into his own bed, and his favorability must have skyrocketed. System, how much does Rong Yi like now? 15%. What? It's only 15. Jiang Wan pouted discontentedly, "I was almost squeezed out last night, only 15%. This dog man is too difficult to satisfy. There is still a long way to go before reaching the standard for the birth system. She won't be squeezed dry by Rong Yi before she meets the standard, will she?" Jiang Wan frowned and wanted to get up, but the pain and accounting from her body made her pause. "Performer, may I use props?" "Props?" "Yes, my favorability increased last night, and I have automatically saved the reward items for you." "Okay, let me see what it is." The system brought up the interface of the prop mall, and Jiang Wan was curious to check each item one by one. Wow, it's worthy of being a subsystem. These props are really. It makes people blush. What post-pain relieving pills, beauty and skin care pills, poison-resistant pills, caring water for sick women, painless childbirth pills, pregnancy carefree pills, tightening and contracting pills. Jiang Wan felt more and more uncomfortable as she looked, and awkwardly exited the interface. What props do performers want to exchange for? What is the rule for exchanging props? The system began to call up the favorability of Jiang Wan's task object. 1% of the task object's favorability can be exchanged for any level 1 item, and 2% can be exchanged for any level 2 item. And so on. Can I exchange any level 15 item now? Yes, the system said thoughtfully, calling up the level 15 prop interface. Jiang Wan looked and chose a beauty and beauty pill and a post-pain pill. Just used, the soreness and discomfort on my body completely disappeared, and the person looking in the mirror inexplicably added a touch of charm. Jiang Wan is very satisfied. By the way, where was Jiang Shui thrown last night? Finally, he was arranged in the Warm Heart Pavilion to the west. To the west. Jiang Wan could foresee the angry look in Jiang Shui's eyes towards her. Compared to her prickly heat all over her body, it was also a masterpiece of other people in the palace, but she managed to escape it. Empress, it's getting late. The newcomers who have just entered the palace unexpectedly went to offer tea to Empress Minfei. After a simple grooming, Jiang Wan led the people in the palace towards concubine Min. Just as I arrived outside the palace gate, I heard the cry of Chi Ai coming from inside. It seems like Jiang Shui. Poor little sister, I suffered such a crime just as I entered the palace. It's not necessarily Qin Pin who didn't let me sleep last night. Jiang Wan's footsteps paused slightly and walked forward with a smile. My sister is late. It's strange, sisters. Don't blame me. As soon as they appeared, the few people present were immediately stunned, and then a hint of jealousy and disdain flashed on their faces. Jiang Wan, who had taken the beauty pill, now had a charming taste from the inside out, even less than yesterday. Oh, I thought my younger sister wouldn't come over today, Minfei said with a smile on her face. Wanner dare not. Looking at Jiang Shui, who was wearing a face scarf and not speaking, she walked over and softly called out, Sister. Jiang Shui shrugged her head and ignored her. Listening to Shui Jieyu's words, Qin's concubine's sister has taken up something that doesn't belong to her, and now she has really flown up to the branch and turned into a phoenix. The mockery in her words was very obvious. Jiang Wan gave Jiang Shui a faint glance and smiled lightly. Yes, Dan's accident in the past made me feel the love of my parents, and now I am also favored by His Majesty. Wanner is very grateful for the kindness that the master has treated me so well, but it has only caused trouble for my sister. Humph, there's no need for you to be hypocritical, Jiang Shui sneered. If Sister Qin feels guilty, why didn't she persuade your Majesty well last night and even ask your Majesty to drive Sister Shui to the Warm Heart Pavilion? Oh, that place has caused many concubines to die of illness. Several concubines were chattering and deliberately exaggerating below. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. Soft and Weak Fake Daughter vs. Extinct Tyrant, 06. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6. Soft and Weak Fake Daughter vs. Extinct Tyrant, 06. Jiang Shui's face turned pale as she searched below, and her eyes were tinged with a hint of resentment. Surprisingly, she was asked to live in a place where many people had died. When I thought about it, I heard discussions in the palace. The emperor valued Jiang Wan and killed all the people who were not well served in her palace, and even sent many people to serve her. But why is Jiang Wan better than her and will receive more favor, both at home and in the palace? The fist kept clenching, trembling with anger all over. Jiang Wan felt helpless when she saw these things, so she must have been thinking about something again. Just in this way, being afraid of things becomes like these people's wishes. As expected, if she saw the misunderstanding and contradiction between the two sisters of the Fong family, concubine Min had a little success in her eyes. At the beginning, I was worried that the two women of the Fong family would win the favor of His Majesty at the same time. But now it seems that their sisters are at odds, and even have deep conflicts. This can be a boost. My sister and I, sisters, have a deep friendship. My sister has always been kind to me, and will certainly not dispute anything with me. Due to the gaze of those around her, if she were to argue, wouldn't it appear that she was very malicious? Of course not. Jiang Shui clenched her hands and took a deep breath. Jiang Wan smiled and took her hand, smiling as she looked at the person dressed up in full attire on the high seat. Your Majesty has His Majesty's own plans, and it's never our turn to make decisions for Your Majesty at any time. Your Majesty seems to be very concerned about your sister. Over the years, the mother clan of concubine Min has gradually gained power and become a prominent family in the capital. There is the only daughter in the palace who has been granted the title of concubine, and the eldest son also serves as the deputy commander of the Imperial Guard. Even though he is now a civil servant of the Imperial Censor, there are many Ba Jie people in the court's politics. After a long time, I became complacent and began to make friends with some political parties, but I completely eliminated people from the hostile camp. Often, due to personal interests, they constantly influence or obstruct Rong Ye's decisions. This can be considered as exceeding the limit. At first glance, Yu Ju challenged Rong Ye's authority as a man, and at second glance, he challenged and despised imperial power. This is also the reason why Rong Yi began to dislike the Wang family and wanted to deliberately suppress concubine Min. But now Min Fei seems to have not understood the meaning behind it, thinking that Rong Yi has not been enthroned as a queen. She is the only person who has been granted the title of empress, the most esteemed woman in the palace, and even the most likely person to become an empress. Suddenly hearing Jiang Wan's words, she felt that she was deliberately provoking her rights, and suddenly became furious. What do you mean by this, Qin Pin? Didn't you think that the emperor favored you last night and started to be arrogant and disrespectful to this palace? Seeing her provoking concubine Min, the concubines she was doing were all filled with joy and schadenfreude. Including Jiang Shui, she began to secretly look forward to the tragic scene of being sent down by concubine Min for a while. I dare not be a poor concubine, but what I say is the truth. Jiang Wan had no fear, just her. Repeatedly provoked and even favored by the emperor, concubine Min had long regarded her as a thorn in her side, but now she has finally caught her mistake. On the first day of entering the palace, he disregarded the rules and frequently confronted concubine Min, which was a considerable crime. Qin Pin, as soon as you entered the palace today, you repeatedly challenged our palace. If you don't teach you a lesson in your actions, will everyone in the palace follow suit in the future? Isn't this palace going to be chaotic? When someone arrived, Qin Bin disregarded the rules and collided with the main palace. She dragged her out and slapped her mouth for 20 minutes, and was punished by kneeling on Changheng Street for half an hour to warn the people in the harem. 20 palms. Those who have been punished will have their faces disfigured. As soon as these words were spoken, the concubines stood up and said, Yes, my concubines, will abide by your teachings. Jiang Shui lowered her body and bowed, her eyes filled with uncontrollable pride and schadenfreude. Jiang Wan, make you proud. However, before she could even get up and sit down, she heard the person sitting in the seat. As the sister of the Qin concubine, Shui Jieyu did not fulfill her educational responsibility. To avoid making the same mistake in the future, let's go kneeling down on Changheng Street together. What? Min Fei's eyes flashed with playfulness, thinking that it was better to separate them. The palace officials came forward to drag away Jiang Wan and Jiang Shui. Jiang Wan's face was calm, without any fear or regret. On the contrary, Jiang Shui turned around and glared at her angrily, as if she was about to be dragged out. Jiang Shui quickly waved away the palace attendant and said, Madam, I have great respect for you and would never ignore you like her. Empress is the most esteemed person in the palace, so I naturally won't do anything disrespectful to her. Seeing that concubine Min was not moved at all, she became even more anxious and felt a hint of evil in her heart. Since everyone is going to be punished, why not Qin Pin? She had always wanted to enter the palace to serve the emperor since she was in the mansion, and even aspired to become an empress, wanting to surpass the empress. Suddenly, there was a complete silence in the palace, holding my breath and looking at the people on the high seat. Jiang Wan's eyes turned cold as she looked at Jiang Shui beside her, speechless for a moment. Fool! Please note that the executing object is coming towards us. Suddenly, a plan arose in my heart, changing my righteous and resolute demeanor. I lowered my head and felt a wave of injustice. No, sister's words are all nonsense, she said, kneeling on the ground with a mournful expression. Empress, of course I won't disrespect her. However, what I just said is true. Your Majesty is the master of the world, and you can naturally do whatever you want. How can I influence your Majesty's decision? What is your Majesty's majesty like this? Her eyes turned red as she spoke, hoping that AI's appearance would evoke sympathy in her heart. The Empress wants to teach me, but I have nothing to say. However, I dare not agree with this point alone. I will go back and be punished myself. After finishing these words, he stood up and ignored the palace attendants around him. He lowered his head and went out to receive punishment. As soon as she arrived at the door, she lowered her head and plunged into a sturdy embrace. Jiang Wan covered her head and looked up with tears in her eyes, and the man's face immediately reflected on his cheeks. Your Majesty, Your Majesty. His crying became more pronounced as he spoke. Why are you crying again? The man said in a low voice, with a hint of coldness in his tone. My concubine, see Your Majesty. Jiang Wan lowered her head and luggage. My concubine, see Your Majesty. Concubine Min suddenly felt uneasy and stood up to salute. Well, just now Qin's concubine. I heard it all, the man interrupted her directly, looking at Jiang Wan who had not moved a little. Upon seeing this, concubine Min felt displeased and carefully observed the man's expression. Rong Yi remained expressionless and couldn't see anything. He reached out his hand and slowly lifted Jiang Wan's chin, looking at her tearful expression. You must be able to protect me, he said. Min Fei frowned, unable to grasp his thoughts, her mind was running rapidly. Your Majesty. What does Empress Min think? I can't make a decision on my own. Her words were light and there was no trace of emotion. But Min Fei, who had been with her for years, was surprised in her heart, which was the tone she would use when she was angry. No, I don't think so. I glanced up at the man, who still had cold eyebrows and no smile. End of this chapter. Chapter 7. Soft and Weak Fake Daughter vs Extinct Tyrant, 07. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7. Soft and Weak Fake Daughter vs Extinct Tyrant, 07. Rong Yi looked at her frightened gaze, and a hint of killing intent gradually appeared in his eyes. The Wang family is really too indulgent, but they still have some use and cannot move. He deeply understands this even when he is angry. I thought Consort Min was going to make a decision for me. No, Your Majesty is the Emperor. How can I make any decisions for Your Majesty? Concubine Min was already in a cold sweat and her back was cold. Why is Shui Jieyu kneeling on the ground? Rong Yi didn't want to bother anymore and looked around at the person whose gaze had frozen on the ground after a week. Jiang Shui was named, and her body suddenly shook. She wanted to avoid something, but when she saw Jiang Wan leaning against him, she felt jealous. She slowly looked up with a pleasing expression in her eyes and said, Your Majesty, it's nothing, I just have numbness in my legs. Rong Yi frowned slightly, with a hint of disdain in his eyes. It's the one who refuses to enter the palace. Bold, Shu Jieyu, how can you use the word I in front of Your Majesty? You should call yourself poor concubine body, and minister concubine. Jiang Shui's face turned white, and her smile stiffened at the corner of her mouth. Sister Shui Jieyu, why are you so ignorant of the rules? It doesn't seem like she was raised by the Prime Minister's family. Jiang Shueduan clenched her fist and looked at the woman speaking, secretly recording her appearance. She is most afraid of others mentioning her identity. Your Majesty, I just saw that Your Majesty was a little excited for a while, so please don't argue with me, Jiang Wan explained. She promised that the Prime Minister would not ignore Jiang Shui. Rong Yi looked at the person lying in his arms like an obedient little cat, feeling itchy and no longer worrying about anything. Well, let's go back to your palace for breakfast. She grabbed her waist and walked out. As she walked to the door, she stopped and said coldly, Minfei, your temper has become quite irritable lately. You'll be well rested in the palace these days, don't walk around casually. As soon as Minfei breathed a sigh of relief and heard these words again, she almost couldn't catch a breath in her heart. Yes, Your Majesty. In the room, the concubines looked at each other. It seemed that concubine Min had encountered an opponent. Only Jiang Shui looked at Jiang Wan, who was being carried away, with a vague and unclear expression in her eyes, and then a hopeful expression rose in her eyes. Zhaoyang Palace. Since entering the door, Jiang Wan has blatantly pressed herself against Rong Yi, her eyes shining brightly as she gazes at him. Rong Yi has seen many beauties, and the admiration and flattery in the eyes of those women have become more common. But it was the first time he had seen Jiang Wan's bright, innocent eyes without any desire or purpose. Even inexplicably wanting to get close. Look at Your Majesty, Jiang Wan said with a small star in her eyes, sweetly recalling what she had just looked like. Your Majesty, you just stood out for me. Humph, are you really brave enough to confront concubine Min? Do you know that she holds a higher position than you, and her father's power is on par with yours in court? His eyes darkened as he said the last sentence. I don't understand these things, I don't want to care about them, Jiang Wan said with a smile. I only know that Your Majesty just protected me. Even if Your Majesty wants to punish me now, I will accept the punishment. Rong Yi chuckled lightly. He had heard such words many times, but at this moment, there was a hint of something strange in his heart. Jiang Wan looked at him with relaxed eyebrows and eyes, not as cold as before, and a slight smile appeared in her eyes. In no time, the palace attendant came in and informed that breakfast was ready. Jiang Wan's eyes lit up as soon as she heard of something to eat, and she turned around and grabbed the man's hand. Your Majesty, I must have been starving just now. Let's go eat quickly. His eyes teased him with impatience. Who is hungry on earth? Jiang Wan looked at the delicious dishes on the table without feeling that she was truly royal. Your Majesty, this congee looks delicious. My concubine will serve you a bowl. Rong Yi nodded silently, his eyes fixed on her. Jiang Wan specifically picked out what she wanted to eat to serve him. Rong Yi clearly noticed her movements, with a hint of a smile on her eyebrows and eyes. Jin Xian, who was serving beside him, immediately glanced at Jiang Wan a few more times when he saw his expression. All right, you can also sit down and eat. Jiang Wan had been trembling so much that he didn't push anything away when he heard this. He put a spoonful of congee into his mouth. The delicious food tasted delicious, and she immediately amused Rong Yi with a look of enjoyment. The man couldn't help but think of the little cat basking in the sun, with a satisfied and enjoyable expression that looked just like hers. Your Majesty, why don't you eat? Jiang Wan blinked as she watched the dishes in front of him remain still. Your Majesty, you cannot be picky eaters. Jiang Wan frowned with a serious expression in her eyes, stood up and scooped a spoonful to feed him to his mouth. Father said, only by eating well can one's body be healthy and enjoy the days ahead in a healthy manner. Rong Ye's eyes moved slightly, looking at the congee on his mouth, but he doesn't move. Enjoying a healthy future. He struggled to grow up in the palace when he was young, and many people didn't want him to grow up, using various dirty methods. Even now, there are still people who don't want him to live well, with countless assassinations and poisons. But the person in front of him was so straightforward and gave him such hopeful words. Rong Yi remained silent for a while, didn't open his mouth, but took the spoon from her hand. Do you really enjoy eating? Jiang Wan smiled shyly and said, but my father said that my daughter's family cannot always be greedy for food and drink. If my husband's family cannot afford it in the future, they will be despised. Ha ha ha, you can rest assured that I can still afford this kind of food. Rong Yi felt relieved. Jiang Wan nodded with a smile, lowered her head to eat the food, and took the opportunity to call the system. How rigid is it now? Report Executor, current favorability +2. Jiang Wan frowned. The revolution has not yet succeeded, comrades still need to work hard. Your Majesty. A cute voice came from the door, and Jiang Wan raised her eyebrows to look at the person entering. Jiang Shui wore a veil and a pink dress on her face, with a mischievous and delicate appearance. Her protruding eyebrows and eyes looked at Rong Yi with a smile. Sister, do you want to have breakfast together? The congee is delicious. Jiang Wan smiles at Jiang Shui, but the smile doesn't reach his eyes. Jiang Shuigan didn't understand, Rong Yi liked innocence but didn't like foolishness, and Jiang Shui it's really stupid. Jiang Shui, however, was unaware. She smiled lightly and sat down on the stool without waiting to say anything. I heard that your Majesty came here to have dinner with his sister, and on a whim, I made some pastries and brought them over. The person offering the treasure handed over the food box. Rong Yi didn't say anything, not even glance at the food box handed over, quietly waiting to watch the play. Wow, sister is so amazing. When did she learn to make these pastries? They look so delicious. Jiang Wan stood up and took the pastries, ready to eat. As he was about to enter the entrance, he was stopped by Rong Yi and waved back. A maid came in and took the pastry from Jiang Wan's hand. She stabbed a piece with a silver needle and took a gentle sip. Your Majesty, no problem. A hint of anger appeared on Jiang Shui's face under her handkerchief, as the pastry she had made herself was being held up. You have the intention, just leave these rough tasks to the servants to do, said Rong Yi expressionlessly. Jiang Shuiduan stiffened her body and felt a bit embarrassed for a moment. Rong Yi caught a glimpse of her expression, with a hint of disdain and mockery flashing in his eyes. The two daughters of the Prime Minister's family are really vastly different. One is intelligent and straightforward, while the other is foolish and impetuous. End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Soft and Weak Fake Daughter vs. Extinct Tyrant, 08. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8. Soft and Weak Fake Daughter vs. Extinct Tyrant, 08. Jiang Shui put away her frustration and anger, stood up and said to AI, it's because I'm stupid and can't do anything that the Emperor likes well. I don't want my sister to be so popular with the Emperor. What? Is he saying in person that he likes Jiang Wan? Upon understanding this meaning, Jiang Shui's face turned red with anger. Why is this different from what was expected? Every time the aunt of the adoptive father's family says this, she will win the favor of the adoptive father, and even the adoptive mother, who is in charge, will be harshly criticized and despised. But she didn't know that this was the imperial palace, not those small families, and Rong Yi was an emperor who was accustomed to the struggles in the harem, nor was she her adoptive father. Pink looks good, but it doesn't suit you. Don't wear it again in the future. The repeated humiliations made Jiang Shui's face turn pale. Looking at Jiang Wan, who was eating breakfast quietly beside her, her face turned even worse. Yes. It's nothing, just go down. I still have breakfast with Qin Pin. Jiang Shui stood up with a pale face to bid farewell, and as she walked away, she saw a deeper resentment in Jiang Wan's eyes. How could you speak for her? Rong Yi asked lightly. Jiang Wan looked up from the small bowl and said seriously, I don't really like my sister, but my father wants me to treat her well. Are you not hiding it? Rong Yi looked at Jiang Wan and found her even more interesting. Aren't you afraid that I think you're a malicious woman? I don't want to deceive your Majesty. If your Majesty hates me because of this, I have nothing to say. I hope your Majesty likes the real me. Jiang Wan looked at the man and asked, so your Majesty, will you hate me? Looking at her cautious appearance, the man seemed to be pleased and nodded, "Of course not. Your Majesty, if your sister does something wrong, can you not argue too much with her?" Jiang Wan looked at the man and said, "My sister and I are both prosperous and have fallen. I don't want the Jiang family to lose, and my father is sad. After all, to live in the palace, besides the favor of the emperor, the backing and status behind it are also very important. As long as it's not something too extreme, I won't argue with her on small matters." "Thank you, Your Majesty. Wanner likes Your Majesty now." As soon as Jiang Wan finished speaking, the man pulled her into her arms. Compared to the harmony on this side, the sound of bowls and chopsticks falling to the ground in Minfei's Ruoshui palace. The palace people were so bold that they dared not step out and knelt down on the broken porcelain pieces, while Minfei looked at them with an angry expression on her face. "Bitch people, they are all a group of bitches. I've been clinging to Your Majesty since I first arrived, just a fox charmer." "Madam, don't be angry. Your body is not worth it because of those unworthy people," said the grand palace maid with a hard face. "Those dog slaves who steer according to the wind, even though our palace is still here, dare to stop my people." It turned out that shortly after Rong Yi arrived at the Zhaoyang palace, concubine Min sent someone to invite His Majesty back here for a meal, just to compete with Lady Qin. But her people didn't even see the emperor's face and were directly stopped outside the door. Empress Min was so angry that she threw a tantrum in the palace. "Empress, calm down. The emperor has only been temporarily enchanted. When he comes to his senses, he will definitely know about Empress." Linglong thought of something and said, "I heard that Xue Jieyu also went to Zhaoyang Palace with something." However, she didn't come out long after and even vented her anger on her subordinates when she returned to the Warm Heart Pavilion. I don't think she gained any benefits. Minfei's anger gradually subsided, and Linglong had a plan in her mind. The Empress, Qin Bin and Xue Jieyu were not their own sisters. They said that they were wrong when they were young. Xue Jieyu was kept by a merchant's family and didn't return to the Fong family long ago. Qin Bin, who was originally the daughter of a merchant, didn't return to her home because she was raised in love. This palace knows. Yes, but judging from today's situation, there is already a rift between Xue Jieyu and Qin Bin. It's better for the Empress to take advantage of this and make Xue Jieyu our person. After all, she and Qin Bin are the closest people and must know something we don't know. Minfei calmed down and kept tapping the table with her index finger. That Xue Jieyu is stupid, and her appearance and figure are not as good as Qin Fun. As long as Qin Fun is cleaned up, Xue Jieyu is not afraid. Minfei chuckled lightly and looked at Linglong with praise. "Good idea, Linglong. I haven't hurt you in vain. Go, pick some inconspicuous things from the warehouse and deliver them to the Warm Heart Pavilion. Just say that our palace apologizes for the incident that almost caused her punishment today." Linglong whispered, "However, I have wronged my mother." Concubine Min smiled faintly and said, "I have been wronged for a while and have lived a peaceful life. This palace is not at a disadvantage, go quickly." "Yes." Half a month before entering the palace, Jiang Wan began to adapt to the life in the palace. During this period, Rong Yi stayed with her almost all the time and had to harass her almost every night. However, even so, the level of favorability increases extremely slowly and occasionally remains motionless. Depressed Jiang Wan was very sad. Every night, she was exhausted and tossed around, but her liking remained stable. Even with systematic props, it can alleviate fatigue and soreness. But at this speed, she doesn't know when she will finish the task yet. Jiang Wan constantly needs to find some breakthroughs, but these past 2 weeks have been very ordinary. The people in the harem were very calm, and concubine Min hardly moved. Even Jiang Shui rarely appeared in front of her. On that day, Rong Yi had just left Chaoyang Palace. After grooming, Jiang Wan went to the yard and checked the items that could be used recently with the system. Suddenly, the maid Qingyu came over with an invitation and said, "Madam, the invitation was handed over from the Minfei Palace." Jiang Wan opened it and took a look. What is Empress? The birthday of Empress Min has arrived, and all palaces are invited to attend her birthday banquet. So, will you go, madam? Jiang Wan nodded and said, "Go." Qingyu pondered anxiously and said, "Empress Dowager Min has been hostile to you for the past few months and has been safe and sound. But now she is entertaining her, I'm afraid there may be some fraud involved." Jiang Wan Dian, what she wants is fraud, otherwise she wouldn't go yet. It seems that Minfei, who has been enduring it for half a month, can no longer hold back. Go, how can you refuse the invitation from Empress Min? Prepare well. Yes, Qingyu said and still didn't leave. Is there anything else? Recently, it seems that Miss and Lady Min have been getting quite close. Jiang Wan was not surprised and nodded indifferently. It's okay, let her do it. She doesn't want to bother with anything, as long as it doesn't affect her ability to complete the task. In the blink of an eye, it was the birthday of concubine Min. In the scorching summer, there is a huge lotus pond in the palace, filled with lotus flowers. It is said that lotus flowers were a gift given to concubine Min by the emperor when she first entered the palace. This time, concubine Min's birthday banquet is held here. Jiang Wan was a bit lazy under the sun and didn't want to move. She sat in her seat, watching the concubines praise each other. Jiang Shui walked towards Jiang Wan in a light blue dress, with the prickly heat on her face having dissipated. She walked towards Jiang Wan with a smiling face. "Waner, my sister has been recuperating peacefully for a while now. It's been a long time since I saw her, but I miss her very much." Jiang Wan smiled lightly and said, "Me too." After all, she still has some acting skills when it comes to not hitting smiling faces. Jiang Shueduan had nothing to say, and she didn't have much to talk about with her originally. However, thinking of something later, he had to continue to arouse her interest. "Sister, these lotus flowers are blooming exceptionally well, but they are not a great place to admire. I know one place, should you go and take a look?" "Okay. The place recommended by my sister must be excellent. Please lead the way, sister." As soon as the maid behind her saw the situation, she wanted to follow. Jiang Shui frowned and said, "Appreciating lotus flowers is an extremely elegant thing. My younger sister, with these inexperienced maidservants, I think it would be extremely tasteless." Jiang Wan nodded and said, "You don't need to follow anymore. I won't have anything to do with my sister's company." Qingyu hesitated to speak, but unfortunately dared not disobey anything. "Yes, madam." "Sister, let's go," Jiang Wan said enthusiastically. Jiang Shui's eyes darkened, and a hint of success flashed in her eyes. Okay. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. Soft and Weak Fake Daughter vs. Extinct Tyrant, 09. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9. Soft and Weak Fake Daughter vs. Extinct Tyrant, 09. Jiang Wan pretended to know nothing and followed Jiang Shui to the nearby attic, which was very hidden but also a good viewing spot. From below, the scenery of a lotus pond is fully visible. Jiang Shui watched her indulge in the scenery, with a hint of success and malice in her eyes. "Okay, Jiang Wan, isn't everyone liking you? I'm going to see how you can defend yourself when I see it today." Speaking, slowly take small steps and step back. At the final entrance, she gave a glance behind the screen. "Sister, the scenery here is really amazing." Jiang Wan smiled and turned around, not seeing anyone else's figure. Jiang Wan frowned and said, "Sister." She softly called out a few times, with a timid and puzzled expression on her eyebrows and eyes, but she had no intention of leaving. "Attention executors, there is someone behind the screen." Jiang Wan raised her eyebrows and eyes lightly, walked towards the screen, and before she could approach, a burly man rushed out from inside. "Who are you?" How did you appear here? The harem is mostly composed of female relatives, serving only maids and eunuchs. However, the man in front of him is burly, with a lush beard and hair, and does not have the feminine demeanor of a eunuch. Even more eerie was when the man's face turned red. He was dressed in coarse clothing, and somewhere in his lower body was already bulging. Jiang Wan's heart flashed with disdain and disgust, as the newly entered favored concubine and an unmarried man and woman who had taken banned drugs shared a room together. Minfei and Jiang Shui are asking her to die. Little lady, with such a national beauty and heavenly fragrance, come and warm up in my brother's arms. The man's eyes flickered with desire and walked towards her. Jiang Wan retreated, her eyes flashing with disgust and impatience. Who are you? I am your majesty's new favorite, Lady Qin. Empress. Ha ha ha, alright, I haven't tasted the emperor's woman yet. She said with a blush in her eyes and pounced at Jiang Wan. Jiang Wan dodged sensitively, and the man pounced on the ground, looking at her with a look of hunger and even anger. Stinky woman, did she give you face? Jiang Wan avoided him while awakening the system. Hurry up, hurry up. What methods or props are available? Subdue this man. Please note that there is a Kung Fu Gaishi pill in the prop store. Taking it can give you 20 minutes of super high martial arts usage time. Even if you are injured, there will be no pain or damage to your lifeline. Do you want to use the prop? Jiang Wan was focused on conversing with the system, and an unconscious man hugged her from behind. Suddenly, goosebumps appeared all over my body. Use. 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 Just as the voice finished, the system sent a prompt sound. The prop has been used. Jiang Wan suddenly felt that her whole body was light and still had strength. With a gentle lift of his hand, he turned around and broke free from the man's control. Turning to look at the enraged man who had not received any relief, Jiang Wan smiled faintly. Encountering this girl today, you're really unlucky. Jiang Wan looked at the man who still had to come forward and turned around with a gorgeous spinning kick. The burly man was immediately lifted a few meters away and fainted before saying anything. Jiang Wan was stunned and then fainted. Isn't it a waste of 20 minutes of her martial arts unparalleled pill usage time? Jiang Wan felt a bit regretful and heartbroken. She had already changed to a different prop. Executor, what should we do now? There is not much time left until the start of the Minfei banquet, and this matter must be handled with caution and speed. System. Alarm, the executing object is walking towards here, there are still 2 minutes left. Okay, it seems that it's not just about destroying her innocence, but also about catching adultery on the spot. This concubine Min is also too ruthless. Rong Yi was walking towards the attic with a gloomy face. Not long ago, he looked around the lotus pond and didn't see any Qin concubine. When he asked her maid, she only said that she had followed Shui Jieyu and didn't know where she had gone. I asked others and they all said they didn't know. Until a palace maid walked in a panic, seeming to be frightened. When I saw him, I was even more panicked. He noticed something unusual and inquired about it. He learned from the palace maid that Qin Bin was in the attic not far away. He was just about to go to the attic when the palace maid intervened and hesitated, looking very anxious. Your Majesty, if you have nothing to do, just tell me. Is there anything to deceive your Majesty? Said concubine Min coldly. The palace maid's body trembled as if afraid, but she couldn't resist the hesitation and oppression of the crowd, so she trembled and spoke. Your Majesty, I just passed by the attic and saw Empress Qin inside, engaged in promiscuity with a stranger. Bold. Without finishing speaking, Rong Yi remained calm and kicked the palace maid fiercely. The palace maid was kicked and struggled to get up, spitting out blood from her mouth. Your Majesty, I didn't lie or dare to deceive you. It's true. The attic is not far away, and you will know it when you go down. Rong Ye's face was gloomy, and the depths of his eyes were shrouded in darkness. Concubine Min flashed her pride and said, "Your Majesty, this palace maid dare not deceive you. It's just that it's related to the reputation of Empress Qin and you. Why don't we go to the attic together and explore the truth?" Rong Yi did not make a statement, but his gaze towards the nearby attic darkened and then he lifted his foot and walked towards the attic. So, a group of people appeared in the attic in a grand and imposing manner. Minfei had a faint sense of pride in her eyes, but as she carefully listened to the sound coming from the attic, there was a hint of unease and confusion in her heart. Rong Yi walked up the attic with a gloomy face, step by step, without expecting an unbearable scene. In the small attic, a man fainted on the ground next to a broken vase, while in another corner, a thin figure trembled and squatted in the corner. Jiang Wan trembled as she looked up, tears in her eyes as she saw the person coming up from the entrance of the building, tears streaming down her face. "Your Majesty," she stumbled up and flew over. Rong Yi looked at the person in his arms who was trembling with fear, his whole body icy cold, and a hint of anger gradually floated in his heart. "Your Majesty, you've only come so late. Wan is so scared." Jiang Wan looked up pitifully, and a big slap print appeared on her swollen face. Behind her, Concubine Min didn't notice the person in Rong Ye's arms and ran up excitedly, saying, boldly, "Qin Bin." The next second made me dumbfounded. How could it be? Shouldn't we have seen scenes of Qin Bin and a man mating? How could this be? In the blink of an eye, Anthony, with a pale face and scars on his face, was a well-dressed person in the man's arms. She knew the plan had failed. Humph, Shui Jieyu is such a waste. What's going on? Rong Yi gently patted Jiang Wan's shoulder. Even though his voice was cold, there was an imperceptible tenderness and anger in his eyes. "Your Majesty, I just want to come here and see the scenery of the lotus pond. I don't know where a man will appear and be waving at my concubine." Jiang Wan seemed to be greatly frightened, even with deep fear and apprehension in her eyes as she recounted the scene just now. "I knocked him unconscious with a vase in a moment of desperation," he said trembling as he raised his hand. "Your Majesty, did Wan kill someone?" What a pure and kind person, even if hurt, still worried about whether they hurt someone. Minfei clenched her fist tightly, her eyes almost bursting with flames. End of this chapter. Chapter 10. Soft and Weak Fake Daughter vs. Desperate Tyrant, 10. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10. Soft and Weak Fake Daughter vs. Desperate Tyrant, 10, Qin Bin, you appeared here but didn't know that man. Minfei said without giving up. "Even if nothing happens, make your Majesty suspicious of her." Jiang Wan tightly grasped the corner of the man's clothes and ignored Concubine Min, but looked up in fear and pity and said, "Your Majesty, Wan really doesn't know him. You must trust Wan." Speaking, "It seems that I am worried that the man may not believe me and I am about to cry." Rong Yi looked at the person in front of him, anxious and worried. The slap on her face was particularly evident on her fair and small face. "This is the harem. There won't be any foreign men coming in. How did he come in here?" And coincidentally, he met the Qin concubine who was enjoying the scenery here. "Are you?" "That's enough." The man spoke out and stopped Minfei from speaking, with impatience and anger in his eyes. "Minfei, you are responsible for managing the harem, but something like this happened. Someone took advantage of the situation to come in and scare Qin Bin. After the birthday banquet is over, go back and copy the Jing Xin Jing 20 times, reflect well." Rong Yi said impatiently. The shawl handed over by the attendant was put on by Jiang Wan. "Your Majesty," said Concubine Min in disbelief, "why punish her? It was only after Qin's concubines became unclean and disorderly in the harem. Why, are you going to defy my intentions?" The louder the man's voice becomes, the colder it becomes, with a warning. Concubine Min gritted her teeth tightly and leaned down slightly, saying, "I dare not, my concubine. Rong Yi is not a fool. He must have been instructed by concubine Min to bring in people from this palace and to be clear about the guards nearby. Moreover, she had just been eager to deal with the crime of the Qin concubine, and it can be said that everyone knows Sima Zhao's intentions. Didn't you come out with Shui Jieyu? Where is she? Your Majesty, Jiang Shui was called out and immediately approached to salute, her brain racing. Your Majesty, on the way here, I remembered that the gift prepared for Empress Min had not yet been taken out of the palace. I was worried that the palace maids might not do it well, so I turned back to the palace to get it. I just didn't expect that my younger sister would encounter such an unexpected situation, Jiang Shui said with a guilty expression as she looked at Jiang Wan. My sister, it's all my sister's fault. You shouldn't have been left here alone at that time. Jiang Wan's eyes darkened and she smiled softly, it's not my sister's business, it's Wanner's bad luck. Jiang Shui breathed a sigh of relief and slowly retreated back into the crowd. Qin Bin was frightened. I'll take her back to the palace, Rong Yi said, stopping Jiang Wan's waist and leaving. Jin Xian looked at the person on the ground and asked, Your Majesty, this person. Chopped it up and fed it to the dog, he said lightly before leaving. Jin Xian was taken aback for a moment, hesitating as he looked at the person on the ground. This person was the second son of Marquis Xiaoye, so he killed him like this. That's why he asked a few extra questions, and I believe your Majesty also noticed. So he whispered, yes. Minfei looked at the man being carried out, and her heart suddenly cooled. Does your Majesty know anything? No, I won't know. Jiang Wan remained silent, holding on to Rong Yi tightly and pressing against him. But in my mind, I was thinking about the punishment I had just given to concubine Min. Even with such obvious framing, there was still no order to punish Princess Min, just a small punishment. It seems that the power of the Wang family cannot be underestimated. Jiang Wan walked slowly along, passing by the lotus pond. The lotus flowers bloomed just in time, and the open spaces along the way were filled with banquets. The birthday banquet of concubine Min was indeed very luxurious. Many invited people have come in and taken their seats one after another, and when they see Rong Yi come out, they all stand up and salute. Rong Yi seemed very annoyed, lightly waving his hand and leaving towards the exit. Everyone was surprised. Isn't today the birthday of Empress Min? Why is your Majesty not accompanying concubine Min as usual, but instead holding on to a woman to leave? Jiang Wan turned around and frowned hesitantly, saying, Your Majesty, today is the birthday banquet of Empress Min, won't you stay? Rong Yi didn't want to stay at all, and now he was restless and looked down at what she wanted to say. But when she came into contact with her clear and innocent eyes, her temper immediately dissipated. No need. Jiang Wan didn't say anything more and raised her eyebrows slightly. It seems that I really don't like concubine Min anymore, but due to the influence of the court, I have to treat her well. Alert, alert, reminding the executor that there is a killing intent approaching. Killing Qi. How could it be? Hua thief, suffer to death. A burst of excitement came from behind. A group of men drew their long knives and stabbed directly at Rong Yi, but the nearby attendants quickly blocked them. However, despite the sudden incident, there was still an assassin who was overlooked and approached Rong Yi with a knife. Jiang Wan looked at the knife that was about to pierce Rong Yi's body, and a thought suddenly came to her mind. Your Majesty, be careful, he said, closing his eyes tightly to block it. Rong Yi had been coldly watching the assassin approach, ready to defend himself, but before he could react, there was an extra person in front of him. Immediately after, the woman collapsed into his arms, with warm blood flowing from her back. Rong Yi immediately kicked the assassin and couldn't help but hold on to the person in his arms. Qin Bin. Your Majesty. Jiang Wan frowned and weakly called out to him, tears flashing in her eyes, and her consciousness became somewhat blurred with pain. Tai Yi, pass on Tai Yi. Rong Yi's angry roar came from the crowd. He didn't even notice, there was a hint of trembling and fear in his voice. Immediately, he picked up Jiang Wan and was surrounded by the imperial army, walking towards Zhaoyang Palace. Zhaoyang Palace. Jiang Wan lay in bed, her eyes tightly closed, with inquiries from the imperial physician, reports from the guards, and roars from Rong Yi in her ears. Waste, someone sneaks in without even knowing, and dares to commit assassination, it's simply reckless. Jiang Wan couldn't help but be shocked when she heard it inside. At first, she didn't want to go up and block that blow. She just thought about the Kung Fu Gaishi pill she had just taken, which wouldn't cause too much pain or harm the vital parts. It's a pity to only use it to deal with that thug. I only wanted to take the knife for Rong Ye's crotch for a moment. The imperial physician treated the wound and slowly went out to save his life. Your Majesty, although Empress Qin was stabbed, fortunately she did not suffer any critical injuries and is now out of danger. I will prescribe some medicine and give Empress Qin a rest. Rong Yi suddenly felt relieved and nodded to let him step down. The guards kneeling at the door were also driven away. Rong Yi walked slowly to the inner room and sat quietly by the bed, watching the people on the bed. Thinking of her resolute gaze just now, she bravely stood in front of him, full of worry and fear before fainting. Humph, even though he is a person who loves to cry and worries, he dares to block the knife for him. Rong Yi grabbed her hand and couldn't help but feel a warmth in his heart. Everyone in the palace is afraid of him because power fears him, and even if there is dissatisfaction, they dare not express it. So some people will secretly find opportunities to attack him, and he has long been accustomed to it, but Qin Bin's actions were unexpected to him. That person's assassination, he can completely avoid it. Don't worry, I won't have anything to do with you. He put his hands into the blanket and got up to go out. After the palace was completely quiet, Jiang Wan slowly opened her eyes. End of this chapter.